Hey everybody, good morning. It is day 145 of spiritual healthcare, and boy, do I have a class for you guys today. I've got some incredible information based off some of the latest science about the paranormal, and we're going to be talking today about precognition. We're going to be talking about residual energy, breakthroughs in those areas, as well as breakthroughs in why we create our reality. Why is it? What is the science behind it? This is huge. This is huge. So good morning to everybody. It's good to see all of you. It's a big day today with huge news in the world of parapsychology and the paranormal. And you guys, if any of you have any like remote interest in psi phenomenon, the paranormal and stuff like that, you don't want to miss this today. Because let me tell you, there has been some incredible breakthroughs over the last number of years that have led to this. So I'm super excited about today. Good morning to Ed and Sally and Dan and everybody that's tuning in. Hello to Marge. Hello to everybody. It is good to see everybody because, as I say, today you do not want to miss spiritual healthcare today, because we're going to be delving into the why of some of the huge questions in regards to the paranormal. The science has just come leaps and bounds in the last little while, and really came to a massive head with this book, which is Advances in Parapsychological Research, 10th edition. These are some of the brightest minds in the world of science today. We're going to be talking about this and some of the highlights that I think you guys need to know about what is going on and what they've discovered. We're going to be, as I say, we're going to be going through things like psychometry, residual energy, PK, so psychokinesis, and the reasons behind why we create our reality. And because they have figured this out. They've figured this out, and they figured out why. So this is going to be like, this is huge. I can't even tell you how huge this is. I had light bulbs going off, every couple of sentences with this book. So I'm going to go through some of this today so that you guys can get a handle on why I'm so stoked about this and why you need to know it. You will never look at this stuff the same way again. I promise you. Good morning to Amanda from the UK. Hey, Amanda. And Daz and everybody that's like tuned in that I haven't said hello to yet. Hello. As I say, I've literally been glued to this for the last week and a half, going through it, and sometimes going through it 2-3 times, before I could really let it sink in, as to what this is going to mean for the field of parapsychology. This is unbelievable. And mediums as well. Big news from them. So this might end up to be more than one class, but we can at least start to delve into it today, and see how far we get, and see if we can get in from, see how long this takes. And good morning to Shauna from Little Rock. Hey Shauna, how are you? It's good to see all of you. I hope you guys had a fantastic week. Things have been just insane here in Canada. Just absolutely crazy. The decision making here has been bizarre. So it's been a really weird week. But I want to start into this. I guess beginning this subject. This is a bit of a rabbit hole. For those of you guys who have been to spiritual healthcare before, some of this stuff you will have some information in, some of it you won't. I'm going to try to explain some of this out as best as I possibly can. And so what blew my mind, first of all, about this, is the fact that I think the how has been something that has been, of course, questioned by paranormal enthusiasts and parapsychologists and whatnot for a very, very long time. And we've kind of known what the phenomenon is. We've been able to take score of what the phenomenon is. We have not been able to understand the how it's worked. How has it worked? And some incredibly brilliant scientists have taken upon themselves to figure out what the how is. And so much of it has to do with quantum physics. Okay, so this is technically what they're considering theory. I think this is more than theory. I think I genuinely think that they've got this. as to what goes on. So I'm going to start by explaining an experiment to you guys, and this is all going to start to make sense in a little bit. So here on Spiritual Healthcare, we've talked many, many times about the idea of getting an idea or, you know, experience a haunting and realizing that we really are creating our reality. It's so much of it is based on emotion. So much of it is based on our you know, what we are tuning into, based on that emotional scale. When we're down into the negative, we tend to attract negative events and occurrences. When we are up in the positive, we tend to attract positive events and occurrences. And paranormal phenomenon falls into this category as well. You know, how much we have cleaned up, the hurt, the pain, the, you know, all of those things that we've got going on will determine the reflection that the universe gives us to our reality. And more recently, what we've discussed is the idea about making a decision. We've talked about the value of our attention and making a decision. And this is where this all comes into play. And I was so fascinated to read about this. So I'm going to start by explaining an experiment to you guys, which was called the EPR experiment. Okay, and this is something that's been done a million times. And EPR stands for Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen. So the three of them came up with an experiment having to do with a photon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use these nickels to demonstrate this so you guys can get this. And this will all come together here in a minute. So you've got these nickels. We're going to imagine that these nickels together is a one whole photon. Okay, so this is one whole photon, and a prism of light comes and splits this photon in half. Okay, so it splits the photon in half. So here's one half, here's the other half. This photon goes flying over here. We're observing this one, okay? Because we can only observe one at a time. So we're observing this one, and we've got heads on this one, okay? So the observer effect in quantum physics and whatever states that whatever we are observing, we get, right? So our state of expectation, everything, what we choose to observe, the probability that we choose to observe, because there's two probabilities. We could have had tails. We didn't. We got heads. So the probability, we choose to observe that, and boom, we've got heads. We've got half a photon. This photon, however, this half, we're not observing it, which keeps this in perpetual momentum. This is constantly flipping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because until somebody observes this, until someone observes it, it can't settle. This is called superposition, okay? So as this superposition is spinning, it's spinning and spinning, until we turn our attention and look at this photon, that photon is going to be spinning in a billion different probabilities, okay? So billion different probabilities. So we turn around and we look at this and bam, say we get tails. Now it's tails. Now it's tails, okay? So here's the kicker. The only thing that can stop this probability in the place that it is conscious attention. Not the attention of a machine, not the attention of a robot, not the attention of it. Conscious attention is the only thing that can stop this from spinning. Okay, so these two are always connected to each other. Always. They're always connected to each other. These never separate. And this is what we call entanglement. These two photons never, ever, ever separate from one another. They are always connected with the other. So this is why this is so important, okay? We know that our attention is going to stop us on the probability that we're intending. So much so that if you read Dr. Dean Radin's studies on the double slit experiment, he got so involved with experiments like this that he couldn't be in the room when the experiment happened, because the observer is the one that determines the outcome of the probability that is spinning. Okay, so I'm going to use a more real world analogy for you guys in terms of how this works. So imagine yourselves walking into a hotel, right? You walk into a hotel and you're in the lobby, you're standing in the lobby. You want to go to one room, except you can't see all the other rooms, right? You know there is infinite probabilities of rooms. And you are basically, you get to pick which room you're in. Those rooms are all spinning in infinite superposition. They're constantly moving. You've got a million different things going on, different probabilities, what they look like, what floor you get, what the outlay of the room is, all of those things. You get a billion different probabilities until you step into one of those rooms and you make a decision to step in. Now, this is huge. This is huge. You make a decision to step into one of those rooms. All of those other rooms, those other probabilities collapse. Okay? All of those other probabilities collapse. You're now standing in a room, the room that you picked. Those other rooms now mean nothing. You're standing in the room that you made the decision on, and you get whatever's in that room. Okay? You get whatever's in that room. So, a scientist by the name of Josephson discovered how important this decision-making really is. And he came to the conclusion that until that decision is made, you've got access to all these other probabilities that could happen. And it's the decision that allows you to create the reality that you are looking for. It's making the decision, and not many people know how to make a decision. We've done past classes on that and how to do it. When you make a decision, a proper decision, there are no other probabilities. They just disappear. So you made a decision, you know what you want, and the universe will yield it to you, just simply because that is no longer spinning in infinite superposition. So how does this apply to the paranormal? Let's talk about that. So let's bring up the idea, first of all, of precognition. Okay, so precognition is the idea within inside that you can see into the future, right? You can predict the future, you can see into the future, all of those things. But here's the thing, and here's why this is such a big deal. What they're beginning to realize is that every single thing that we experience, and we've talked about this, happens in the now. Happens in the now. And precognition is basically the idea that you are bringing about what they're calling a wave function, essentially, is that by making the decision, by observing, because we know that unless you observe this, you're not going to get it. By observing whatever it is that you are attracting in your future event, when you sit down and you meditate and you pay attention to something, that attention stops the probability from spinning. And now all of a sudden you have created what it is you want simply because you have observed it. So precognition, and this is the big aha here, with at least with this area, is that precognition is the observation of a future event, something that's going to happen, what you consider in the future, which has already happened because everything's in the now. It is stopping your attention on a probability and deciding that that's the probability that you're going to experience, and bam, you have to experience it. It's a big deal. This is a big, big, big deal. So this also applies to things like psychometry. This applies to things like, people talk about card reading. People talk about, all of these different things. He's predicting, how did I predict my future? How did I get deja vu and realize that something was there? The observation is what will make it true. And this is one of the things that I've told my clients for ages, is the fact that when we're dealing with a negative haunting, we're dealing with something that we don't want, that our attention to whatever it is, and this is why attention, I just hammer it in all the time, every class, our attention to will bring it to you. It will stop it in front of you. And the observer effect is it's a blatant example of this. So let's get into this a little bit more. Let's talk about something like residual energy, okay? So we've talked before about the idea, for those of you guys who are not familiar with the term, residual energy is the idea that the environment can play back, okay? It can play back different events. So sometimes people will see apparitions, they're not conscious, they're images in the environment, they'll hear windows breaking, they go into the room, there's no window broken, but it happened, maybe 10 years ago. These events tend to be really repetitive, all sorts of stuff like that. So things that are going on in the environment, however, not things that are going to be, are conscious, right? They're not conscious, there's no environmental interaction, it's noises, sounds, smells, sights, but no movement. So residual energy, this is where it becomes interesting. We remember that our two photons are always connected, okay? And you guys have probably heard stories of, and this happens frequently when you start to ask surgeons and doctors and things like that. When somebody gets a transplant, whether it be usually lungs, heart, major organs, stuff like that, they begin to take on characteristics of the person that has passed away, that has donated the organ. And sometimes people wake up and they have crazy mad skills. They'll be, you know, playing piano and they've never taken a piano lesson. They've you know, they've got a personality change and it reflects the person that had passed away. All of these different, just bizarre things that have been recorded after somebody has a transplant. Well, one of the reasons that this seems to be happening and what is being propositioned in this book is that these two photons basically, or the you know, the memory cells, you know, because every cell has everything's got a partner, is that these end up entangled. These basically end up entangled, and entanglement just means that there's a connection between one and the other. And the idea is that when we are interacting with something, whether it be, you know, maybe not as severe as something like a heart transplant or something like that, but when we are interacting with something, the fact just that I've, you know, been handling this book for a week and a half leaves traces, and that entanglement is what is creating things like residual energy. It's what's creating things like, you know, the ability to pick up and have somebody like my good friend Matt, who is brilliant at psychometry. He can pick up an object and tell you all sorts of things about the person that owned it and where it came from and so on and so forth. And what's allowing them to do that is the fact that there is left over of the person that handled it within the matter of the object. And it, as I say, all comes back again to this. So it's not necessarily that there's, you know, a person that has some super special ability, but it's our ability to tune in to that quantum entanglement. And probably one of the best quotes that I've heard about this, and I thought this was absolutely brilliant. Find it again here. Is the psi is the human experience of quantum interconnectedness. So as you can see, when we're moving through the world, we're leaving impressions. We're leaving impressions on everything that we touch. And those impressions, because of that quantum interconnectedness, can be picked up and read. And as I say, this was like, my mind blew up when I was reading this, and I just couldn't wait for this morning to be able to share all this with you guys. Because I think it's going to change the way that we look at paranormal phenomenon. So we know decision-making is massive. We know the interconnectedness, understanding of the observer effect is massive. You know, all of these things will play in. So Anna's saying, so it's not like a video recorder. When you record someone, you can go back and forth and back and forth. And what oh, hold on, sorry. I'm like, everything's like blowing up on me. Here we go. They can't stop repeating what's happened to them. It's basically everything leaving impressions. Yeah, so exactly. So the idea that spirits and whatnot are getting stuck somewhere or anything like that, like get rid of that from your dialogue, because there's no evidence. There's never been evidence of that. But residual energy is literally, it's an imprint over and over and over and over and over again. So it's not conscious. It's just an imprint. Every interaction that's been recorded on a conscious spiritual level has been extremely free flowing and free will. So they tend to drop in, drop out. You know, sometimes they'll hang around places more than other places, but they don't get stuck. So as I say, this is a really big deal, you guys. Now the other thing that this affects, and what they're still beginning to understand and to look at, which is, again, is a lot of it's covered here, is psychokinesis. So PK, psychokinesis. And psychokinesis is when your attention, your energy, some sort of emotional thing that you've got going on is causing, it basically starts affecting matter, okay? It's affecting what they call matter waves. So I could pick up, for example, or this book could fly across the room, for instance, something like that. And usually it's caused by some very deep senses of hurt, fear, frustration. Those are the emotions that PK is typically connected with. So when I'm dealing with clients or anything like that, of course, one of the first things I'm always doing is looking for triggers. I'm looking for people, what's going on within individuals, what their triggers are, emotional state, what's been going on in their life, all of those things. Because I look for those regardless anyway. But what's interesting about this is that now we know why maybe certain objects might be the target for things that are getting, levitated and chucked across the room. And again, it's winding itself back to the idea of quantum interconnectedness. The idea that our interaction with it leaves a trace. And they're taking a look at something called the delayed energy. Okay, it's called delayed energy, or the decline effect, which is a popular term with physics professors and things like that. So the idea of the decline effect is the idea of if you would imagine, for example, you filled up a bathtub of water, right? And when you start dumping in hot water into a cold bath, the water that's right underneath, that's just being introduced, that water becomes warmer immediately. The rest of the water, as you kind of move your hand through the bathtub, you notice that the rest of the water kind of gets colder. The further you go from the source of that hot water, the rest of the water kind of gets colder. And they're beginning to understand that this effect also applies to psychokinesis. The source of the energy, let's say you, the source of that energy, the further away it gets, the less effect it has on those objects. So for example, there's been studies done where the person who is inadvertently causing the PK goes on a holiday. And the rest of the people that live in the house, they're bipping along, they're doing their thing, and they don't notice as much activity. As soon as that person comes back in, all of a sudden they're starting to notice more activity. So this is kind of the same idea. So it's this sort of delayed, not delayed response, but a decline in power or boost of what's going on in the environment, because the source of that energy has made some distance from it. It's really interesting. We often hear of people who are experiencing PK that really think it's a haunting, and they run to their neighbors or they run to somebody else's house or something like that, and they say, well, it followed me. Well, yeah, because you're the source of what's being projected, right? So as I say, this stuff applies to PK as well, and I think this is going to give us, going forward, a brand new understanding of our role in how we are creating the environment around us. Like, seriously, to understand that when we interact with something, there is a part of who we are that is becoming entangled with whatever it is we're picking up and interacting with, whatever we're leaving behind. So somebody, say like my friend Matt, who's an amazing medium, can go into these environments, right? Go into these environments and go, this happened here, that happened there. I know somebody, I feel like somebody's maybe passed away in this room, or, there's been a lot of tension in this space. Well, how do we know that? How does he know that? It's because he's become really, really, really good at picking up on the other side of that quantum entanglement. And that's what they're doing. It starts to make a lot of sense. Now, interestingly enough, when they were beginning to do studies and things like that on people who were claiming to be psychics and whatever, and this is where things get really, really interesting. So the next time you're deciding that you're gonna go get a psychic reading or something, keep this in mind. Now, if we put aside all of the fakes, right? The cold readers, the hot readers, the warm readers, the people who are just, fishing for answers and all of that kind of thing. Put aside the fakes. What they're beginning to understand is that a lot of these mediums that are extremely accurate, the ones that have a beyond, 50% chance of getting things right, what they're picking up on is not necessarily that somebody is, talking to them on a non-physical level. What they're beginning to understand is that much of this has to do with their ability to pick up on that person's, or on what that person is dealing with. They're picking up, again, we're talking about this sort of telepathic connection. Not so much that it is something where, they're picking up on something disincarnate from somewhere else. They're actually picking up on the person in front of them, and it's becoming almost like a telepathic connection. And so, as I say, this stuff, you guys, it's next level. If you want to dig into it, pick it up. Advances in Parapsychological Research, 10th edition. Pick it up. It's not a huge read. It's a big read. I'll give you that. It's a big read, and it's from McFarlane Books. Okay, so it's not cheap. I'll give you that as well. It's not cheap, but it's worth every penny. You will not regret it. So moving forward with this information, we now have the understanding that when a conscious person or an animal, whatever, is able to make a decision on what it is that they're intending or expecting, what it is we're observing when we turn on the news, what it is we're observing when we walk into the world. What do we choose? What are we choosing to put our attention on? We've talked about this for ages in spiritual healthcare, about where our attention goes, energy flows. And we've understood for years and years and years, and they've understood it in texts, religious texts and texts all over the world, that when we get into that state of allowing an expectation, stuff starts to show up, and the universe will yield to us where our attention is, what happens to our environment next and next and next and next. And when we start to get that psi is indeed the human experience of quantum interconnectedness, we can understand that whatever we are putting attention on, we influence. Everything. Like, all of it. And it applies to psi. Everything that happens has already happened. In order for memory, for example, to work, we have to be drawing from something. We have to. These premonitions that people get, these ideas that, all of a sudden you're sitting there and you think, oh my God, so-and-so has just passed away. And you feel like you've got no reason to be thinking those things. Remember, everything happens in the now. Everything happens in the now. And when we have drawn from a memory and we put our attention on that and we observe it, we become the creator. We become the creator of our reality. It's really interesting. So I wanted to, I'm not going to do a reading or anything like that today, because I know I hit you guys with just a crap load of information, and it's huge. It's just huge, but it's something that I think we can take, move forward into our experience, and start looking at our reality in a brand new way. As I say, it's gonna really start to define, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Start to define, as I say, what you're paying attention to, what you're watching on TV, what you're taking in as information. Are you how are you feeling on a day-to-day basis? Because here's the other thing about this. They have found a strong, as we've talked about many times before, a strong emotional connection to how our mind receives these thoughts. And we've known that. We've talked about this on spiritual healthcare so much, is that when we're feeling bad, we attract negative thoughts. Thoughts are things. Thoughts are things just as anything else is a thing. And we have infinite probabilities of the thoughts that we can think. So when we're feeling in the negative space, we tend to attract more negative thoughts. When we're feeling in the positive space, we tend to attract more positive thinking. So, and this, it's still, that all still applies. You know, when we're sitting in the clay, basically, of being able to mold what it is that we want to, that we want to create. And I know we're going to have like a ton more discussions about this in the future. Like, I know that for an absolute fact, because this, we're just hitting on the beginning of this. Next week, next week I want to talk about the psychics and police officers and how that all intertwines as well. Because we hear about, you know, psychics and police and how that's working, and you know, whether or not they help or don't help or whatever, and the media kind of likes to play it up that they help and whatever. So we're going to be talking about that as well, and how this all intertwines into it. But I wanted to dump this all on you guys this morning, because I think it's going to give us a lot to think about. I think those of you guys who have been doing the journaling work and stuff like that we've been doing, go back on your journals with this information, and you're going to have a lot of aha moments. I know I did that. And I started to really go back on things that I've been doing, and the things that I've been successful at, go back on those. And you're going to start to see a pattern that is really, really clear. Like, the moment that you made the decision to do a thing, to do a thing that you weren't going to accept anything else, the moment that you made that decision, all those other probabilities start to collapse, all those rooms start to collapse, and now you're left with the thing in front of you. You're going to start to see patterns in what you've done, how you've made things work before, and why certain things haven't come about. You're going to start to see that too. So I am stoked about what you guys are able to take and apply this to, because I found myself going back over and back over and back over, you know, things that have happened, paranormal occurrences that I've had, all sorts of things like that, and realizing, like, okay, this is, you know, now I've got a even better handle on what exactly is going on. So I want to leave you guys with that today. I hope that this has made sense. If you guys have any like questions or whatever about it, I will do my best to answer them. So either, you know, throw them in the chat or send me an email, and I'll do my best to answer some of them. I'm still learning as well. So you should see my book right now. It's ridiculous. Like, I've got, hold on. This is what the inside of my book looks like right now. It's like, it's, you know, it's just unbelievable. But it was like literally every paragraph was an aha moment. It's an aha moment. It was just absolutely neat. Yeah, once we can get a handle on this, the world of parapsychology is going to, it's going to explode. It's going to explode. Nothing was the same after this book. So yeah, I wanted to give you guys that today. I hope this was enlightening. Say, you're gonna have to go back on this class and watch it 10 times, and you'll never look at Nichols the same way again either. But just remember, the, you know, you've got the two halves. You know, here's you, here's the probability, right? That's connected with you. What are you going to observe? You get to choose. What are you going to observe? You know, what do you pick? And there's your reality. There's what comes out of it. So, that being said, everybody, I want to leave you guys with some affirmations. Go back over this class. Go back over your journaling work. Go back over, you know, stuff that's happened, events that you've had go on. And remember, it's about the decision. We get to choose. We get to pick. We get to pick. So let's get some affirmations under our belt. Yeah, Sean is saying it's interesting. I'm not sure I understand it all. It's big. This is big. It's big information. And as I say, we will go back into this as we move along in spiritual health care. So don't worry if you guys don't get it right off the bat. As I say, this took me a bit, and I just threw a lot of information at you in the last half hour. So don't pressure yourselves thinking you have to get it all at once, because as I say, I'm still computing this too. I know I'm going to have aha moments coming up. and whatever as well. And as we move along in spiritual healthcare, we'll start to unravel this a little bit more. So don't worry if you, because honestly, the scientists that are working on this, they don't understand it all either. They don't. We're just on the cusp. We're just on the cusp. So we'll parse this out, throughout the next number of weeks. And as we bring up topics, we can start to intertwine this into the topics and begin to move forward with it. So don't worry. So don't worry. So I want to leave you guys with some affirmations before we go, so that you guys can kind of process this and go into your week with the right energy. Everybody take a breath. Shake yourselves out. Get rid of anything that you're hanging on to. Just shake yourself out. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself and who I am. I recognize and am grateful for all the abundance that is constantly flowing into my life, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining my connection to Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. And at this moment, all is well. I'm able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. And I'm able to embrace love while letting go of fear. And I find peace with the soothing silence of my inner being. And everybody take a breath. Yeah. Shauna says what she gets out of this is that she has the power to choose. Yeah, you know what? That is exactly it. That is exactly it. That is the best summary, I think, of this that you could have possibly come up with. Is that we have the power to choose, and the choice matters. The choice matters, and that is Shauna, I could have said it better myself. The choice matters more than we think it does. We often think we don't matter. We're told we don't matter. We're told our decisions don't matter. They matter. They matter. They will create your experience. They matter. And we've got to realize that's, I think, the internalization part of this. We have to realize that they matter. And we don't create other people's reality, but we do create ours. So that's everyone is creating their own experience with this. Everybody. So thank you guys for sticking with this. I know it was a lot. As I say, go back over this. It will be this will be available, on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/entityseeker, as well as, of course, entityseeker.ca. It will be uploaded there later this afternoon, so you guys can go back on this and check it out. Have an amazing week, you guys. We've got lots to get into in the next classes, so we'll see you all later. Bye, everyone.